more than just a few weeks after Trump's second term in the White House started, and a few exchanges of hostages held by Hamas and Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jail just took place. It is worth having a pragmatic analysis looking at the hostages, the prisoners, and their families. For Palestinians in Gaza, the truce or the ceasefire offers a rare moment of relief. After enduring relentless bombings and unimaginable loss and sufferings unparalleled in the recent history, the ceasefire was met with a jubilation and joy and a long-awaited sigh of relief on the Gazan streets. The Gazans paid for peace with their blood. Most of the 47,000 reported killed were children and women. Though the actual count still remains uncertain, it can be very high than what is being reported. Even during a 3-hour delay in the ceasefire start time on January 19th, Israeli bombs killed 19 people. Now, masked men and uniformed Hamas fighters escorted the hostages through a sea of massive cheering crowds. It seems more like a victory parade, a stark contrast to the Israeli claims of Hamas eradications as a fighting force, even though the Hamas have taken a big hit and they have lost many of its leaders and fighters. Everyone expected that the hostages would look sick, weak, and tired, barely in living conditions, after a very long time in captivity. But when the hostages appeared live, it was jaw-dropping surprise for many. The hostages looked very healthy, happy, well-fed, and well-dressed. They were wearing just like some sort of a military uniform or something looking like a military uniform. Definitely that is not the clothes they were wearing when they were captured. They were escorted to a podium where they waved at the crowd, they showed the thumbs up sign, and they were looking cheerful. Remember, for the last 15 months, Israeli authorities starved Gazans purposefully, creating a huge shortage of food, clean water, and medicine. They used food as a weapon of war. So when the Gazans were starved, they fed the hostages, Hamas fed the hostages very well. We have seen the horrific pictures of children and elderly fighting for a meal in hot kitchen centers. Despite this, looking at the hostages, they have been fed well and treated well by their captives. While Gazans were starving and forcibly displaced from multiple times from place to place. Moreover, it looks like that the hostages have been sleeping well too. There is no obvious signs of stress on their face. Now the big question remains where they have been kept during the last 15 months. Israeli forces have been searching every inch of the small strip and every corner of the building, arrested thousands of and tortured them to extract intelligence without yielding any results, as many would have thought that they were deep inside tunnels somewhere. However, many tunnels were bombed or poured concrete into the tunnel shafts, and some cases flooded with seawater. Nevertheless, it is very hard to believe that the hostages lived in a tunnel all this long. If so, there won't be no sunlight in the tunnel, and there is a lack of oxygen would have caused serious mental, physiological, or psychological trauma. Obviously, there is no such signs on the hostages. So the big question remains where they were hidden, or whether they were constantly being moved around from place to place. If so, again, it is hard to believe how it can be done without the idea of noticing it, given that 24-hour surveillance flights around the sky, drones was on the sky flying around, in addition to ground troops. Hamas won't tell us where they were hiding the hostages, nor the hostages publicly either. They are banned from doing so after the mishap when the hostages released in November 2023 spoke high about their captors. Regardless, the ability to hide the hostages so secretly, despite the might of IDF, shows the strength of Hamas, and it is going to be a big and serious problem for Israel. Now let us have a look at the Palestinian prisoners who was arrested. Prisoners looked, and now they have been released. They were looking sick, thin, and lost weight. with signs of torture and sleep deprivation. One notable figure is Khalid Jarrar, a leader of PFLP and a member of Palestinian parliament. This is how she was looking when she was arrested. And she was kept in a solitary confinement in a cramped cell in an Israeli jail. And this is how she is looking now when she got outside. She suffered immense personal losses, including the death of her daughter and father while she was in jail. Israeli forces even refused her to attend their funeral. Now look at the Palestinian bodybuilder. He was arrested and who spent just 9 months in custody without any charges. And this is how when arrested.
This was Palestinian bodybuilder Moazzaz Abayat before he spent 9 months in Israeli custody.
This is how he was looking when he got released. Look at his pathetic condition.
Abayat couldn't walk unaided after being released from incarceration in July. Then, in an October raid on his home, he was detained again. Before being rearrested, the 37-year-old father of 5 was diagnosed with severe PTSD by Bethlehem Psychiatric Hospital. Medical notes from the clinic in the occupied West Bank say his condition relates to his time at Israel's remote Ketziot prison. The notes state that Abayat was subjected to, quotes, physical and psychological violence and torture in prison, and describes symptoms like severe anxiety, withdrawal from his family, and avoidance of discussion of traumatic events. Abayat spoke to Reuters from a hospital bed in July.
الحياة في السجن منذ 7 أكتوبر.
Life in jail since October 7th is a life that no human on earth can imagine in general, especially in the prison of Negev, which is like Guantanamo. It is like a prison in the Negev desert down in the bottom of Palestine on the map. This prison is isolated from the world.
أقصى خارطة فلسطين تحت هذا السجن معزول عن العالم.
They act in the most disgusting and tough torture on earth against isolated detainees, handcuffed, hungry, and ill.
He was not part of any ceasefire exchange deal. He was released earlier. Now you can make out the difference between a prisoner who was held for 9 months in Israeli jail and hostages held for 15 months by Hamas and how they looked when they were released. Now let us continue to watch the news clip from major media outlets. Al Jazeera reported dying in hell, the fate of Palestinian medics jailed by Israel. One of Gaza's most prominent doctors may have been raped to death, recent revelations show, but he is not only the one. This report was about a Palestinian medical specialist and an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, who cared for his patients relentlessly and refused to abandon them despite harsh conditions when Israeli forces repeatedly raided and destroyed their hospitals. He was captured by IDF in December 2023. 4 months later, guards dragged Al-Bursh and dumped him in the prison yard, naked, from waist down and bleeding and unable to stand. He died moments later. He was a family man with 2 young kids. Francisca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur for Palestinians, noted on X, Dr. Adnan, a stellar surgeon, the embodiment of Palestinian ethics, likely raped to death. The ceasefire may have brought temporary calm, but the road to lasting peace remains uncertain. Nevertheless, the contrasting narratives of hostages and prisoners remind us of the deep divisions still at play. The show of Israeli hostages released by Hamas definitely helped to increase the perception of Hamas. That's all for now from me. Thanks for watching.